Today on Fear and Greed, Donald Trump is set to become the 47th President of the United States. Equities, the US dollar and Bitcoin surged on the back of the Trump trade, and the head of the Federal Treasury says changing taxes isn't the answer to the housing crisis. Welcome to Fear and Greed, daily business news for people who make their own decisions. It's Thursday, the 7th of November 2024. I'm Adam Lang, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Adam, after a very late night.
A very late night indeed, Sean. The main story this morning, and it is a big one, Donald Trump has claimed victory and is set to become the 47th President of the United States after winning crucial battleground states like Pennsylvania in the US election.
In the end, it wasn't as close as expected, with Trump claiming key states like Pennsylvania, you mentioned, but Georgia and North Carolina as well. Talking outside Mar-a-Lago, Trump forecast a golden age for the US, saying he'd been given an unprecedented and powerful mandate. He was speaking a couple of hours before the election was actually called for him. While counting in other battleground states, Michigan, Arizona, Nevada and Wisconsin continues, Donald Trump could well sweep them, meaning he could end up with not just a majority of the electoral votes, but a popular majority as well. He didn't receive that in 2016. The Republicans are set to win control of the Senate while the House of Reps remains in the balance. While there were sporadic reports of interruption to voting, including hoax bomb threats, the election ran relatively smoothly. Exit polls show that the number one issue for 35% of voters was the fate of American democracy, followed by the economy at 31%. Abortion was cited by 14%. And immigration just 11%. Last night, world leaders, including the heads of France, the UK and Israel, congratulated Mr. Trump, as did Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. He's got quite a bit in this fight.
Sean, it seems that markets were confident of a Trump victory too, with the US dollar jumping and Bitcoin hitting a new record.
Well, the US dollar is up 1.5% against major currencies. Not good news for the Aussie dollar. It's now trading around 65 US cents. That move in the USD over the past 24 hours was the biggest one-day move since March 2020. It hit a 4-month high. Bitcoin, we all know Donald Trump seems to he has become a crypto fan. Bitcoin hit an all-time record of $74,400 US dollars a unit. It's up 80% this year. Local crypto exchanges yesterday said volumes were very high. With the US dollar high, some commodities started feeling the pressure. Copper was an example of that. Gold was the outlier. It's still trading near record high levels. Bond yields also rose. Now, Donald Trump's plans to restrict immigration and place tariffs on imports are inflationary. That could mean higher interest rates for longer. Hence, that's what's happened in that market.
Sean, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese was quick to come out and say that Australians' relationship with the US will remain strong no matter who wins the election. How are you seeing it?
Yeah, well, I mean, he said that before the actual result came out. He said that the election of a new US president is always a moment of profound consequence for the world and our region. He said that the alliance between the US and Australia has always been much, much bigger than the individual. He also paid tribute to Joe Biden, the outgoing president. He called him a friend. He's obviously clearing the way for a better relationship with Donald Trump, perhaps, than Malcolm Turnbull had when Donald Trump first got to office. Mind you, Donald Trump did do things like he ratified the Quad agreement between India, Japan, Australia and the US, and he certainly supported Australia's role as a player in the Indo-Pacific against China. So it's unfair to say he's not a friend of Australia, but, you know, with suggestions he wants to put massive tariffs on, I'm not sure he's a friend either.
Yeah, there is a change there, Sean. Now, the local share market seemed enthused by the election results. The S&P ASX 200 closed up nearly 1% to 8,200 points.
So there's a general feeling that Trump is good for equities. That's mostly because he wants to cut the corporate tax rate in the US, which should boost earnings. We'll have to wait and see on that, because if he does keep interest rates higher for longer, the long-term impact might actually be negative. But at least in the short term, equities seem happy. Tech stocks in Australia yesterday, financials and consumer discretionary stocks all did best. Energy stocks were worst. Commonwealth Bank hit a record high, $145.31 a share. What a juggernaut, Adam. What a juggernaut. Up 45%.
It is incredible.
It's up 45% over the last year, and just doesn't know when to stop. National Australia Bank, it's releasing its results today. ANZ is out tomorrow. Otherwise, Domain dropped sharply yesterday after delivering a trading update which wasn't overly appreciated. And Mineral Resources was down after one of Australia's biggest investors, the Future Fund, said it wants to seek more information from the board on Chris Ellison's involvement in tax evasion. Chris Ellison being the founder and managing director of Mineral Resources. Future Fund has about $88 million worth of stock in that company. If anyone is going to put pressure on the board over corporate governance, it should actually be the Future Fund, and that's exactly what they're doing.
Sean, it has been an enormous 48 hours. We'll be back in a moment with the rest of the day's business news. National Senator and Opposition Transport spokesperson Bridget McKenzie failed to declare more than a dozen free flight upgrades in breach of Senate disclosure rules, Sean.
Ouch.
Whoops.
Embarrassing back down for Senator McKenzie. She certainly led the attacks on Anthony Albanese and his relationship with Alan Joyce. She previously said she hadn't received any perks. Well, she has. At least 12 domestic and international business class upgrades on Qantas and Virgin flights since 2011 when she joined Parliament. She wrote to those airlines in the last couple of weeks and asked whether she had received upgrades. They came back. Clearly she has. She hasn't updated that. At least in her register of interest, she hasn't declared that. So technically, she's actually in breach of Senate disclosure rules. A spokesperson for the Senate said that she's just working through the records at the moment. All this stuff, Adam, it comes down to a question of character. So the claims that Anthony Albanese rang Alan Joyce, the CEO of Qantas, for upgrades when he was Transport Minister didn't look good at all. That came out of a book by a guy called Joe Aston, a former columnist at the AFR. Now, the Prime Minister's people have just flatly denied that it happened. They said it didn't happen. Opposition leader Peter Dutton's been caught up in it. He took a flight on Gina Rinehart's private plane from Brisbane to Sydney. He called on her for some help. Now we've got Bridget McKenzie under fire. It's just one of those ones which keeps giving what is interesting. Parliament sitting this week, not many questions from either side about this particular issue.
It's a story that keeps giving for journalists, Sean, and taking from reputations of politicians.
Yeah.
So moving on, Sean, the boss of Treasury, Stephen Kennedy, said the best way to improve the housing crisis is not by charging taxes, but by increasing supply.
Yes, he was appearing before a Senate hearing. He was asked about whether cutting capital gains tax breaks and negative gearing would help improve housing affordability. He said, well, he called them areas of interest, but ultimately it's a supply question. He went on to say tax reform, this is right up your alley, Adam, tax reform should be thought of in the context of the broader system rather than individual taxes, and that broader affordability issues were too complex to come down to any single policy. He said Treasury has modelled these sorts of reforms as a matter of practice for several years. Now, there was a bit of a hoo-ha, shall we say, in the past couple of months when it emerged that Josh Frydenberg. He was a former treasurer. Jim Chalmers, Jim Chalmers had asked Treasury for modelling on this. Now, I don't know whether he asked Treasury for modelling on it or not, but what the head of Treasury, Stephen Kennedy, said yesterday was they do it as a matter of practice anyway. He also went on to say government spending on disability and healthcare was making a strong contribution to economic growth. And he said any higher tariffs under the Trump presidency could hurt local economic growth.
Sean, given we are talking housing, it's a good time to mention today's edition of the Property Pendulum. This is coming up in your playlist straight after the show. This week, it's all about what a property listing is really telling you. The listings are full of secret codes, and if you know what to look for, you can save yourself a bunch of time and a lot of hassle.
Yeah, that's with our great friends at Domain. Looking forward to that one because, you know, when you read those listings and you think, I'm not sure that what that's saying actually is going to reflect what I'm going to view.
Renovator's delight, Sean?
Stuff like that.
I'm keen to understand the code myself. Moving on to industrial property group Godman, they've done a lot more power deals for a new wave of data centres that are being developed globally.
Yeah, so Goodman's an incredible company, the ninth largest company on the ASX. It's up 65% of the last year, easily the best of the top 10 companies. The only one in the top 20 companies better than it is WiseTech Global. Goodman has a network of $80 billion worth of global properties. It held its annual general meeting yesterday. Yesterday, Adam, yesterday. It's pushing into data centers. Big question about data centers is power. How do you get power into it? Anyway, Goodman says it's done a bunch of power deals for all these new data centers. The CEO, Greg Goodman, said that data centers in the end would be built near industrial parks in places like Western Sydney. It certainly seems to be the future for a lot of these industrial property companies.
Fortescue Metals Group held its annual general meeting yesterday, and Sean, Executive Chairman Andrew Forrest said the company still planned to be a major player in green energy, and that's despite its retreat from hydrogen this year.
Yeah, so Mr. Forrest said that the company plans to eliminate the use of fossil fuels in its iron ore operation by 2040. Remember, a couple of months ago, back in July, it dropped its green hydrogen ambitions, basically too expensive, too hard. So how do they get to neutral fossil fuels by 2040? Well, Mr. Forrest yesterday said it was via technological breakthroughs, whatever they're going to be, and electrification of its mining fleet. Fortescue Metals also said it will lean on governments to help reduce the cost of producing green energy.
Sean, staying in iron ore, prices jumped yesterday ahead of expected stimulus from Beijing, and then they tumbled, taking the share price of the big miners with them.
Yeah, really weird day. So the share prices of the big miners actually jumped sort of around 1%, but then they ended up, it was the end of the day, about 1% lower. As a group, the big three miners have been very ordinary over the past year. BHP's down about 7%. Fortescue Metals Group is down about 19%. Rio's down about 3%. Remember a few weeks back we were going on about BHP being the biggest company on the bourse again? Well, Commonwealth Bank is well and truly bigger. It's about 10% bigger than BHP, and that's all occurred in the past couple of weeks. Really, only Woodside, which is down 30%, and Woolies, which is down 16%, have performed worst among the big stocks. So the big miners are really, really struggling. They just can't overcome the weakness in China. Iron ore itself is still trading above $100 a tonne, but I mean, it's been that way since the beginning of last month. It's just they just can't seem to get any momentum going whatsoever, the miners.
Sean, moving to international news, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu fired Defence Minister Yoav Gallant, saying long-standing disagreements between them over the conduct of the conflicts with Hamas and Hezbollah had become impossible to bridge.
Mr. Netanyahu said that Mr. Gallant's statements and action contradicted the decisions of the government and the Security Cabinet. For his part, Mr. Gallant said he was sacked because of his advice to compromise over the war in the Middle East in order to recover hostages. He also said he was sacked for his call for the conscription of young religious men. Now, tens of thousands of Israelis protested the decision, blocking streets and starting fires. The bottom line here, Mr. Gallant, he's really been pushing for a ceasefire to hopefully help get free those hostages. But the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, keeps saying that Israel must keep fighting to defeat Hamas.
Sean, moving to Apple, Apple has warned that future products may never be as profitable as its iPhone business as it pushes into artificial intelligence and virtual reality headsets. Now, Sean, I've got a confession to make here. I'm a recent purchaser of a brand new iPhone, so I've contributed to that profit.
Well, it's interesting because, this all came out in the Apple annual report. Until now, Apple's never really been so direct in addressing the financial profile of its future products, according to a report in the Financial Times. So Apple has really lived off the iPhone for a decade or so. People like you are still buying them, so they're still doing well. But the push into China, hasn't been quite as successful as they'd hoped. And some of the other things, artificial intelligence, virtual reality headsets, they probably just won't be earning the revenue or at least the profits that iPhones have. Apple's basically investing heavily in AI to catch up with rivals like Google and Meta, as well as in its new Vision Pro spatial computing headset. Its first Apple Intelligence features were launched last week for that headset. Plenty going on with Apple. It's a really interesting stock at the moment. It's facing regulatory pressure on its App Store and other parts of its services business. There's a recent US antitrust victory against Google that threatens to cut off billions of dollars of licensing revenues that Apple makes from the search group. And of course, over the last week, we found out that Warren Buffett is selling down holdings of Apple. Just to rub salt into the wound, it's lost its position as the largest company on Wall Street. Nvidia's share price was up nearly 3% over the past 24 hours. It's worth $3.43 trillion. Apple's at about $3.38 trillion US dollars.
Staggering numbers.
Yeah.
Sean, moving to South Korea, a celebrity has become one of the richest chefs in the world after his restaurant franchise was listed on the Korean exchange, and his worth soared to about $400 million.
Apparently he's South Korea's Gordon Ramsay, Adam. That's what they say.
Okay.
I hope, and I apologise.
He gives feedback pretty directly then.
Yeah, I think so. I apologise if I get the pronunciation wrong here, but Pak Yong-won was in Netflix's Culinary Class Wars, which apparently is the top streaming title for non-English shows. His restaurant listed on South Korean bourse almost doubled in price. And the restaurant's called The Born Korea. I'm sure the Korean name is something a little easier to the ear, but The Born Korea. Basically, K-culture has just taken off. Plenty of fans, particularly in the food and culinary sector. The chef is also a master marketer, 58 years old. He's had a bunch of TV shows. His YouTube channel has 6.6 million subscribers. The restaurant chain itself, affordable menus with casual dining experiences, makes him one of the richest chefs in the world. Who else? I'm going to give you one guess, Adam. Who's the richest? This is according to Bloomberg. Who do you reckon the richest chef in the world is?
What's his name? Wolfgang Puck in America? Would he be one?
Well, they say Jamie Oliver is.
Oh, okay.
$400 million.
Well, look, that's fair enough.
Yeah.
He is a machine.
He is a machine. I once went and saw him at the State Theatre in Sydney, and it was one of the
Sean.
One of the more interesting things I've ever seen, I must say. It was fantastic, Jamie Oliver.
It was like a rock show.
Yeah, it was. And I don't know whether there was one that you saw, but when he did, he said, I'm going to make a pizza from scratch. And first thing I'm going to do is ring up Domino's and order a pizza. And I'll tell you how to make a pizza quicker than the guy that delivers it. And the guy turns up 30 minutes later with a pizza. And he walks on stage and looks into the crowd and goes, oh, my God, where am I? And
Hello?
Jamie Oliver's there saying, and in that 30 minutes, he'd created the base in this incredible pizza. And he basically said, come on, mate. And the guy just looks at the crowd and goes, uh-oh, what am I doing here? And anyway, he got $100 tip from Jamie Oliver, which I think he was happy about that. Jamie Oliver threw I don't know if it was Domino's, but it was like a chain pizza into the bin and started munching into his own. There you go.
I must have been a different night. Sean, my night was with pasta, not pizza.
Ah, right. No, I was a pizza night. There you go.
Now, up next is the property pendulum on what real estate ads are actually saying. That's right in your Fear and Greed playlist on your favourite podcast platform or at fearandgreed.com.au. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Adam.
It's Thursday, the 7th of November, 2024. Make sure you're following the podcast. Join us online on LinkedIn, Instagram, X, TikTok and Facebook. And please have a great day.